There's actually a lot of reasons why we might find work to be life-threatening.
In my head.
Have you ever been at work and you were in the middle of something and somebody asks you, like, what are you doing? What's going on? And then you realize that you kind of like blanked out and you weren't really doing anything and you're kind of like, I don't know. Let's talk about that. That could be dissociating at work. Maybe you found yourself in the middle of writing an email or talking on the phone with a client or a customer and you just realized like, oh, I wasn't even listening. I don't even know what I was writing. What the heck is going on? As I said, this could be dissociating at work, and if this is a recurring problem, it could be a big deal because it may be hard to get your work done. You may not actually get your work completed. You may get it sloppily done, and maybe you're making mistakes and you're causing the company you work for money. If it's your own company, you're costing yourself money. So it's a problem. We got to figure out what to do about it. Let's talk about that. So dissociation itself is a normal phenomenon. We all dissociate a little bit. We're all probably familiar with driving somewhere or walking somewhere and we don't realize how we got to where we were. Like, we know we walked there, we know we were driving, but we don't know what happened to that time in between. That's an example of dissociating. Sometimes we think of dissociating as like spacing out, daydreaming, zoning out, not being fully there, and that's what dissociating really is. It's not fully being present in your body, being aware of what you're doing, aware of your surroundings. Typically we see dissociating when somebody's under a lot of stress, which work, of course, is going to be a place where you're going to see a lot of stress. It's also a pattern that we see in people who've experienced trauma, because when trauma happens, something is threatening your life, and sometimes we can't do the fight or flight that we normally think of when we have something traumatic happen, and we freeze instead. And when we're in that moment of freezing, we dissociate, we detach from our body as a way to protect ourselves from whatever we feel is life-threatening. There's actually a lot of reasons why we might find work to be life-threatening, so let's go through some of those, and maybe that will help you figure out why you might be dissociating, and then we'll talk about how to fix it so that your productivity level doesn't go down, so that you can continue to work and you don't have to feel so stressed out and like you're losing chunks of time in the middle of your day. One reason that you might be dissociating is obviously the workload, the stress, and the arousal level that comes with working. And I don't mean sexual arousal, I mean that anxiety level that goes up and up and up as we go throughout our day. Because we pile on the work, sometimes our bosses aren't aware of how much it's affecting us, and so we dissociate to deal with that. Maybe we find ourselves under a strict deadline, or we have a lot of pressure to get something done because we're a part of a team and our piece is crucial. And so we work harder. We ignore some of those feelings of anxiety and those clues that we're feeling stressed because we feel like it needs to get done, it's time sensitive, it has to happen now. And when we do that, we're not giving ourselves the chance to lower that anxiety, to lower that stress, and so it builds up and we might dissociate to try to handle it. I know that this is something that I've done myself, as I'm somebody who deals with things by dissociating. And I should mention here that dissociating doesn't have to be like a thing that we're doing on purpose. It happens just kind of naturally. We're not so aware that we're checking out. It just happens and then we experience it. So I'm somebody who has dissociated a lot, and doing this YouTube channel, sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lot of work and I notice like, oh God, why am I dissociating? Like, I'm sitting here, I'm spacing out, I'm clicking on the other tab on the browser, looking for ways to kind of like get away from the work when I should be doing the work. Why is that happening? And when that happens, I have to do some of the coping strategies, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Something else that might come up at work is there's a lot of interpersonal relationships you have to deal with, whether that be with coworkers or your boss. Let's talk about each of those separately. When it comes to interpersonal relationships, we all know they can be stressful, especially when we have to rely on each other to get certain pieces done when it comes to work. When we have projects we need to get done, we need to deal with somebody that maybe we normally wouldn't have to deal with, that we would just set a boundary in our life and remove them from our lives. We can't do that at work unless we're the boss. And so when we have other coworkers that we have to deal with, it can get very stressful, it can get challenging. And when we feel like we just can't deal with it anymore, we may just dissociate. Now, of course, if there's the boss has an authority over us. And especially if we've gone through childhood trauma, then we may find that our boss kind of brings up these memories of having somebody like a mother or a father who used to abuse us or who used to treat us unwell, who didn't acknowledge us, who didn't validate our emotions. And so that could be a really difficult situation to manage while we're working. You know, even if we're the boss, it's hard because when we have to manage other people, a lot of people have conflict within themselves and we don't know how to always manage that ourselves. Maybe it feels like raising a child sometimes, or raising children, the way that we have to get people to cooperate and to do things. And so that could be really difficult. All right, so what are we supposed to do about this? Like, dissociating just kind of happens. We're not even really so much in control of it all the time. And so, like, I struggled with this myself. It took me a long time to be able to control my dissociation. I want to give you some tips here. Probably the first thing that you're going to want to do is figure out what's triggering your dissociation in the first place. What is happening before you dissociate? Start writing it down. Once you figure that out, you can start to either try to remove that stressor from your situation. Maybe there's a project that's just too much for you to handle, so you acknowledge that, you let your boss know, and you put it to the side. Or maybe if you are the boss, if you're an entrepreneur, you hire it out to somebody else. Just, if you can't handle it, then acknowledge that. Acknowledge that it's too stressful. That's one thing you can do. You don't really want to make a habit of doing that, though, because if you continue to do that over and over again, what you're really just doing is avoiding the dissociation and not coping with it. So if you want to cope with it, you start to learn what these triggers are. You learn what these stressful situations are, who these stressful people are at work, and you manage it. So the way that we manage dissociation is grounding, and grounding is just getting back in your body, getting present again, becoming engaged with your environment, becoming engaged with that person that you're talking to, so they're not so frightening and they don't trigger this immense stress that makes you dissociate in the first place. There's a lot of different ways that you can do grounding, but basically you just want to engage what we call your five senses. So smelling, sight, taste, touch, and hearing. Any of those things will get you back in touch with your environment. I think this is actually why people like coffee so much, besides the caffeine and how it perks you up. It's also that smell gets you engaged again with what's around you. You know, it's really easy to daze out when you're sitting at a computer all day, or you're on the phone all day, you're in one spot. So consider getting up and moving around and feeling your feet hit the floor and feeling the air. Go outside and feel if there's a breeze or something, and get in touch with your environment again so that you come back to life, as I might say. And then from that position of being here, being present, you have a little bit more power to be able to manage whatever the situation is that's in front of you. Because when you're dissociated, it's kind of like you're half on, you're not working at full capacity, and you make mistakes. I think for myself, I've usually dissociated when I've been trying to meet a goal and I've had like this immense amount of work that I just cannot handle, but I'm trying to convince myself that I can handle it. And so if you can get that workload down, or maybe try to expand the timeline of how long things will actually take for you, that may help. I know sometimes it's frustrating to feel like, well, I need this done today, I don't have time, but if it's causing you to dissociate, you're not going to do it well in the first place, and you're probably going to have to revisit it and fix all the mistakes that you made, because I've done this myself. So set realistic expectations for what you can do. I know that it can be hard to feel like it's going to take so long, but as you practice grounding, as you practice managing your stress, as you get more in tune with what you're able to handle, you're actually building a skill and you'll be able to handle things faster, but you have to start here. So are you somebody who's dissociating at work? If you are, let me know what's going on with you. Let me know if you have any tips for somebody else. Leave those down in the comments below. If you're new here, I have over 250 videos on mental health, including dissociation. So if you want to learn more about this, hit subscribe and hit the bell after you hit subscribe to get notified each time that I do a new video. My mission is to humanize mental health and help everybody understand that these issues affect us all. If you're on board with that mission, I can't do it alone. Go on over to Patreon and help me. I will put the link above. Thank you for coming out here and joining me today, everyone.